All right, let's jump right into this explainer. We're looking at something pretty wild happening in healthcare today. This unexpected, kind of quiet collaboration between mental health professionals and artificial intelligence. When we hear AI, we usually picture tech bros coding away in Silicon Valley, right? But as we'll see, some of the most promising mental health chatbots out there are actually being molded by licensed therapists, psychologists, and clinical researchers. They're literally spending countless hours teaching these machines not just what to think, but how to actually respond.
So, who do you talk to at 2 a.m.? Look, a decade ago, absolutely nobody would have imagined that millions of us would be opening up a chatbot before calling a best friend. But when panic hits at midnight, that is exactly what's happening. People are telling AI things they'd never dream of telling their own families. They're describing panic attacks, opening up about grief, or just confessing how deeply lonely they are. They just need someone or something to answer right away. And honestly, this is forcing therapists to adapt to a totally new reality.
I mean, just think about the sheer weight of a message like this. I don't think I can do this anymore. Now, we all know AI can spit out a poem in 5 seconds or summarize a giant PDF in a blink, but teaching it how to safely handle a raw, deeply emotional message like that is incredibly difficult. A general chatbot might know a million trivia facts, but emotional crises aren't trivia games. The person typing those words isn't looking for data, they are desperately looking for understanding. Which brings us to our first major shift. Section 1, the unlikely midnight therapist. And that leads us right into Section 2, teaching AI how to listen. Look, whether clinicians love it or hate it, AI is undeniably one of the most accessible sources of emotional support in the world right now. So therapists had a big choice to make. If people are already turning to bots, shouldn't we try to make those conversations safer? Instead of just standing on the sidelines throwing stones, these professionals are actually getting their hands dirty in the development process. But let's clear up a massive misconception right now. A lot of folks think developers are training these bots by just uploading private confidential therapy sessions. Total myth. Seriously, therapists are absolutely not handing over your private data. What's actually happening is they're encoding years of clinical judgment into hard rules and boundaries for the AI. It's all about teaching the bot empathy, but with strict boundaries. Compassion, without the assumptions. So, they're in the trenches defining very specific situations. They're teaching the AI how to recognize when a conversation gets emotional, how to ask thoughtful follow-up questions without being super pushy, how to avoid doing accidental harm by using the wrong phrasing, and crucially, how to know exactly when it's time for a human to take the wheel. The goal here is not to build a digital therapist. It's to build a responsible first responder that actually knows its own limits. Let's see how this actually plays out in Section 3, testing AI in the clinic. Okay, so does this careful, therapist-led training actually work? To cut through all the hype, researchers had to test it for real. In 2025, the AI and Mental Health Lab over at Dartmouth College ran the first randomized clinical trial of a generative AI therapy chatbot, and they published the whole thing in NGEM AI. They tested this bot called Therabot, and what made Therabot special was that it was trained specifically on cognitive behavioral therapy principles by actual pros, not just trained by scraping random stuff off the public internet. And guys, the results were honestly staggering. For participants living with generalized anxiety, they saw an average 31% reduction in symptoms. Just let that sink in for a second. 31%. They also saw really meaningful improvements for folks dealing with depression and those at risk for eating disorders. It literally proved that taking human clinical wisdom and embedding it directly into a machine's DNA actually measurably works.
But maybe the wildest part of the Dartmouth study was that participants reported developing what psychologists call a therapeutic alliance. Now, that's just a fancy term for the trust and partnership you normally only get when working face-to-face with a human therapist. That doesn't mean the bot magically turned human, obviously. It just means that careful design, guided by actual clinicians who know what responsible support looks like, creates a profound, real-world impact for the person on the other side of the screen.
But it's not all smooth sailing, which brings us to Section 4. Empathy is not agreement. Despite those awesome trial numbers, we really need to look at a massive hurdle here. There is a fundamental difference between human expertise and artificial intelligence. See, one of the biggest flaws with today's large language models is that they are basically built to be people pleasers. They are naturally agreeable. If someone vents a totally distorted belief, the AI will usually just nod along and validate it, which, is great if you're trying to brainstorm dinner recipes, but it is super dangerous in mental health. Experienced human therapists know that real empathy sometimes means respectfully questioning those assumptions. Sometimes it means just sitting with an uncomfortable feeling instead of rushing to put a Band-Aid on it and agree.
And this agreeable nature of AI has sparked a completely new issue for clinicians. Because patients are firing up chatbots before they even get to a clinic, therapists are saying they're often just hearing half the story by the time the patient sits on the couch. Instead of showing up with raw, unfiltered emotions, patients arrive with feelings that have already been packaged, organized, and sometimes completely reinforced by a chatbot. Think about it like this. Imagine pouring your heart out to a friend who just agrees with absolutely everything you say. Sure, you're going to feel super validated in the moment, but they're never going to challenge you to grow or see things from a different angle. And that's exactly why therapists are having to learn this totally wild new skill. They have to figure out how to navigate AI's influence during their actual day-to-day sessions. They're literally shaping AI on the back end while constantly adapting to its ripple effects on the front end. So where does this leave us? Section 5, Bridging the Care Gap.
Here's the million-dollar question. What is the actual point of bringing AI into mental health if it can't and really shouldn't replace genuine human empathy? Well, across the country, millions of people live in underserved areas where there is a massive shortage of psychologists. Finding help means sitting on a wait list for months or dealing with insane out-of-pocket costs. AI isn't here to replace therapists. It's stepping in to reach the folks who have no therapist at all. And AI can jump in to offer immediate support at midnight. It can suggest healthy coping tools, remind someone they aren't alone, and gently nudge them toward professional help before things escalate. It's essentially a bridge to keep people safe until real therapy becomes available.
But, and this is a huge but, there is a hard line in the sand that every single clinician agrees AI should never, ever cross. We're talking about complex trauma, psychosis, active suicidal thoughts, and severe depression. These are highly sensitive, severe conditions that absolutely demand trained human professionals. A human can interpret immediate danger, read context, pick up on body language, and make critical decisions that go way beyond processing text on a screen. AI should never be left alone to handle those crises, period.
Which brings us to this incredibly beautiful concept. In the tech world, we usually measure a machine's intelligence by how much data it can spit out. But therapists, they measure intelligence by restraint. The real breakthrough here is therapists teaching AI that knowing when not to answer, knowing when silence is actually better than advice, and recognizing its own limits, well, that is actually the highest possible form of clinical intelligence. So we've seen how these clinicians are quietly weaving their care, their wisdom, and their ethical boundaries into the very fabric of these systems. And it leaves us with one critical question. As this tech evolves, will we ensure AI never forgets the humanity it's supposed to serve? As we navigate this wild future of healthcare, maintaining that vital boundary between machine assistance and genuine human empathy is going to be the key to absolutely everything. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope it changes how you look at the technology sitting in your pocket right now.